The gold leaf invitation felt like a shard of glass in my hand. Mr. and Mrs. Albright cordially request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their daughter, Candace, to Leo Miller. Miller. My name. The name of the man who built our world, and the name of the boy who tore it down. I traced the embossed letters of my son's name, a name I hadn't spoken aloud in 21 years. It felt alien on my tongue even in thought, a word from a language I no longer knew. The invitation was a formality, a prop for their perfect narrative. The dutiful son, caring for his poor, broken mother. They didn't expect me to understand it, much less attend. In their eyes, I was a piece of furniture that breathed. An inconvenient heirloom. And soon, an heirloom they planned to discard. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in my small, beige room at the back of Leo's sprawling house. It was the room they gave the help in old movies, stark and airless, a place for someone who wasn't meant to be seen or heard. It was a far cry from the home I'd shared with Daniel, a house filled with light and books and the sound of his laughter, a sound that had been the scaffolding of my entire existence. I could still hear it if I closed my eyes, a low, warm rumble that vibrated right through my bones. When that sound was extinguished, all sound had seemed to cease with it. The silence hadn't been a decision, not at first. It had been a drowning. The day the police came to the door, the world had simply muted itself. Their words were just shapes their mouths made, meaningless puffs of air. Daniel was gone. My Daniel. The man who could name every constellation, who planted sunflowers along our fence just to see me smile, who held my hand every night as we fell asleep. The impact that had crumpled his car had also crushed my larynx, not with force, but with a grief so absolute it solidified in my throat, choking off every word. In the abyss that followed, language became a mountain I could no longer climb. Leo was 16, on the cusp of manhood, and my silence terrified him. He'd shake me, his young face contorted with a frustration that quickly curdled into resentment. Say something. Mom, just say something. But there was nothing to say. The world was empty of words because it was empty of Daniel. My younger daughter, Maya, was only 5. She didn't demand words. She would simply crawl into my lap, her small hand patting my back, her presence a tiny, warm anchor in the vast, cold ocean of my sorrow. She learned to read my sighs, the flicker of my eyes, the tension in my shoulders. We developed a language of our own, one of touch and shared glances. It was Leo who translated my silence into his own narrative, that I was broken, incapable, a permanent patient for whom he was the reluctant, long-suffering doctor. It was convenient. It became more convenient when Daniel's life insurance paid out. A substantial sum, meant to secure my future, our children's future. I was in no state to manage it. I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the official documents, and the numbers and clauses would swim before my eyes like meaningless insects. Leo, with the arrogant confidence of a teenager, who thinks he knows everything, stepped in. Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle it, I let him. What did money matter when the currency of my life, Daniel's love, was bankrupt? I signed where he told me to sign, my signature the only voice I had left. And so it began. The slow, methodical siphoning of my lifeblood. First, it was his college tuition, a prestigious university I knew Daniel would have wanted for him. I saw the withdrawal slips. I said nothing. Then it was the seed money for his first tech startup. It's a sure thing, Mom, he'd explained to my impassive face, his words echoing in a room where I was present only as a ghost. This will set us all up for life. The startup failed, as did the second. The third one, however, took flight. My silent investment, my muted sacrifice, became the foundation of his success. He built a glass and chrome life, filled with people as shiny and hollow as his condo. He moved me from our family home, the house Daniel and I had poured our souls into a small apartment, and then, when Candace came along, into this beige box at the back of their designer mansion. They told their friends it was so they could keep a close eye on me. The truth was, it was so I could be their unpaid, unseen housekeeper, a silent spectre, who tidied their messes and then vanished when company came. The last straw, as they say, wasn't a singular event. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a death by 1,000,000 dismissive glances. But the one that finally severed the cord of my long-suffering patience happened last Tuesday. I was polishing the silver for their engagement party, my hands moving with the practiced, invisible efficiency they had come to expect. They were in the adjoining kitchen, their voices sharp and clear, believing me to be not just mute, but deaf as well. "We have to do something about her after the wedding, Leo," Candace said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. My parents were asking. It's just sad. Having her shuffle around. It brings the whole mood down. A pause. The clink of ice in a glass. "What do you want me to do, Candy?" "She's my mother." Leo's voice was weary, as if discussing a faulty appliance. "I know, darling. And you've been a saint. A literal saint. But this is our new life. A fresh start. We can't have her living here. My designer, Jeffrey, said the guest wing is perfect for a home gym, and her room, it's just dead space." Her words were like stones, each one a dull, heavy impact. "There are some very nice facilities," she continued, her tone brightening. "Clean, quiet. They are equipped to handle people like her. People who are gone. We can visit on holidays. It would be the kindest thing, really. For her. And for us." I stopped polishing. The ornate fork in my hand grew heavy. My reflection stared back at me from the polished surface, a pale, blank woman I barely recognized. Then came Leo's reply, the 3 words that finally broke the dam. "You're right. Let's do it." He said it with the same casual finality, as if agreeing to change their cable provider. A facility. A place to store the outdated furniture. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, the beige walls of my cage closing in. I thought of Daniel. I thought of his vibrant life, his booming laugh, the way he would grab me and waltz me around the kitchen while spaghetti sauce bubbled on the stove. This silence, this meek submission, it wasn't a tribute to his memory. It was a betrayal of the life he had given me, the strong, vibrant woman he had loved. My grief had been my sanctuary, but my son had turned it into my prison. And I had handed him the key. In the deep, quiet hours before dawn, a resolve hardened in my chest, solid and clear as diamond. The drowning was over. It was time to swim for the surface. The next morning, I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in 2 decades. I wrote a short, simple note to Maya, who was away at college, a kind, perceptive soul who deserved more than her brother's cast-offs. "Dearest Maya, I am taking a short trip. I am safe. I will see you at the wedding. All my love, Mom." I packed a small overnight bag, not with the drab, grey clothes Leo and Candace bought for me, but with the few precious things I had kept hidden. A deep emerald green dress Daniel had loved, a string of his mother's pearls, a pair of elegant, low-heeled shoes. I slipped my checkbook, the bank statements I had meticulously archived for 21 years, and a small, worn photograph of Daniel into my handbag. My first stop was the main branch of the downtown bank. Mr. Harrison, the branch manager, was an old friend of Daniel's. He was grayer now, his face lined with the years, but his eyes were still kind. He looked startled to see me. "Elara. My goodness, it's been an age." He led me into his office, his brow furrowed with concern. He knew the story, or at least, Leo's version of it. I sat opposite him and slid a notepad and a pen across the polished desk. "Hello, Robert. It's good to see you." He read it and gave me a sad smile. "And you, Elara? What can I do for you?" I spent the next hour writing. I laid out my request with a clarity that surprised even me. I wanted to close the joint accounts I held with my son. I wanted to transfer the entirety of my personal portfolio, the one funded by Daniel's insurance and my own inheritance, into a new, private trust. I wanted to liquidate certain assets that Leo had leveraged for his business loans for which my capital was the unspoken collateral. I passed him the statements, the records of transfers, the quiet, documented history of my son's financial ascent on the back of my silent grief. As he read, his expression shifted from sympathy to shock, then to a quiet, simmering anger on my behalf. He saw the numbers. 174 separate transfers to Leo's personal or business accounts over 20 years. He saw the systematic draining of a fortune. He looked up at me, his gaze no longer pitiful, but respectful. "This is substantial, Alara," he said, his voice low. "Are you absolutely sure?" I met his eyes and gave a single, firm nod. The nod felt like the first word I had spoken in years. An hour later, I walked out of that bank feeling lighter than I had since the day Daniel died. The invisible weight on my shoulders had lessened. I had taken back the key. My next stop was a law firm. I had researched them online, a firm specializing in financial and family law, known for its discretion and its ferocity. I had an appointment with a Ms. Albright, a woman with iron-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. Again, the notepad. Again, the meticulous documentation. She read through my written account, her expression unreadable. She examined the bank records, the property deeds, the business investment papers I had insisted on keeping copies of. I had been a silent archivist of my own diminishment. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me, really looked at me, for a long time. "Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of pity. "Your son has committed what amounts to a severe breach of fiduciary duty, at the very least. Morally, it's theft. Legally, it's a house of cards we can bring down at a moment's notice." She explained the steps. The legal notices. The freezing of assets. "When do you want to proceed?" she asked. I picked up the pen and wrote. "On his wedding day." During the reception. A flicker of something, surprise, admiration, crossed her face. She gave a thin, sharp smile. "I see. A public reckoning. Very well. We can have the papers served to him personally at the event. It will be memorable." We spent another hour devising the strategy. When I left her office, I felt a tremor of fear, but it was overshadowed by a cold, thrilling certainty. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist. I was the architect of my own liberation. I checked into a boutique hotel overlooking the city park. The room was beautiful, decorated in shades of cream and blue, with a small balcony. I stood out there, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sun on my face. It was the first time in years I had been truly alone, not just lonely. That evening, I did something I hadn't dared to do in 21 years. I tried to speak. I stood before the mirror and looked at my own reflection. I saw the lines of grief etched around my eyes, the pale cast of my skin. But I also saw a flicker of the woman I used to be, the woman Daniel had loved. I opened my mouth. At first, only a croak emerged, a rusty, painful sound. My throat felt tight, the muscles atrophied from disuse. Tears streamed down my face, tears of frustration, of sorrow for the lost years. But I didn't stop. I thought of Daniel. I thought of his favorite song, an old, beautiful ballad by Etta James, "At Last." He used to sing it to me, terribly off-key, while we danced in the living room. It was our song. I tried again. It was a strangled whisper. I took a deep breath, focusing on the memory of his hand in mine, the warmth of his smile. I hummed the melody first, letting the vibration loosen the tightness in my chest. Then, I tried the words again, softly, just for myself. At last, my love has come along. The words were shaky, fragile things, but they were there. They were mine. I spent the next 2 days in that hotel room, talking to myself. I spoke of Daniel. I spoke of my anger at Leo. I spoke of my love for Maya. I read pages from a book of poetry out loud, my voice slowly growing stronger, clearer, shedding the rust of 2 decades of silence. I was excavating myself, word by word. And I sang. I sang at last over and over, until the notes flowed not from a place of pain, but from a place of profound, reclaimed love. The day of the wedding arrived, a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday. I dressed with care. The emerald green silk dress felt like a second skin, a suit of armor. I clasped the pearls around my neck. They felt cool and solid, a tangible link to a legacy of strong women. I looked in the mirror and saw not a ghost, but a Lara Miller. Daniel's wife. Maya and Leo's mother. A woman who was about to speak. I took a taxi to the opulent country club where the ceremony was being held. I walked in alone. A wave of murmurs followed my progress down the aisle to a seat in the back row. People who knew me from Leo's story stared, their faces a mixture of surprise and pity. I saw Leo at the altar, resplendent in his tuxedo. He caught sight of me, and a flash of annoyance crossed his perfect, curated face. What is she doing here? I could read the thought as clearly as if he'd shouted it. Candace, a vision in white lace, simply ignored me, as one would ignore a stain on the carpet. The ceremony was a lavish spectacle of hollow vows. They spoke of love, trust, and partnership, words that had become meaningless in their mouths. My daughter Maya, a bridesmaid, kept looking back at me, her expression a mixture of worry and hope. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. She was the only one in this room who had ever truly seen me. The reception was held in a grand ballroom dripping with crystals and white roses. The air was thick with expensive perfume and self-congratulation. I sat at a table in the far back, a silent observer at the feast of my own ruin. I watched Leo and Candace move through the crowd, accepting accolades, their smiles bright and brittle. After the dinner plates were cleared, the toasts began. Candace's father gave a bland, corporate speech about mergers and acquisitions, comparing the marriage to a successful business deal. Then, it was Leo's turn. He took the microphone, his handsome face arranged into an expression of humble gratitude. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "To my beautiful bride, Candace, you have made my life complete." He paused, letting his gaze drift to the back of the room. "I also want to acknowledge my mother," he said, his voice taking on a tone of patronizing solemnity. "As many of you know, she suffered a great tragedy many years ago, and has not been the same since. She can't speak, but I know she is here, and I know she is proud." He raised his glass. "For 20 years, it's been my honor to care for her, to be her voice when she has none. It taught me the meaning of responsibility." A wave of sympathetic oaths rippled through the room. My hands, resting in my lap, clenched into fists. The hypocrisy was a physical thing, a sour taste in my mouth. "To my mother," he finished, his eyes meeting mine with a look that was not love, but a warning. "Behave. Stay quiet." That was it. That was the moment. The final, gilded insult. While the applause was still echoing, I stood up. I started walking towards the stage. A hush fell over the room. The sea of faces turned towards me, their expressions universally stunned. It was like a scene from a movie, the one nobody expects. I saw Leo's smile falter, replaced by a mask of pure panic. "Mom? What are you doing?" he hissed as I approached the stage. Candace's face was a study in horrified disbelief. He moved to intercept me, to steer his embarrassing, broken mother back to her corner. But before he could reach me, Maya was there. She stepped in front of him, her bridesmaid's bouquet held like a shield. "Let her go, Leo," she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the silence. "For once in your life, just let her be." He froze, shocked by his sister's defiance. That was all the time I needed. I walked up the small set of stairs and stood before the microphone. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy, expectant blanket. I looked out at the sea of faces, confused guests, Candace's horrified parents, Leo's business partners. And then I looked directly at my son. I took a breath. And I sang. The first note of "At Last" was a little shaky, a little thin. But then, the years of practice in my hotel room, the decades of love for the man this song belonged to, took over. My voice, clear and strong, filled the ballroom. It was a voice no one in that room, save for me, had ever heard. It was a voice rich with love, with loss, with a sorrow that had finally found its release. At last. My love has come along. My lonely days are over. And life is like a song. I sang the words not to the room, but to the memory of Daniel. I poured 21 years of grief, 21 years of suppressed love, 21 years of silent rage into that melody. The shock on the faces before me was profound. Jaws literally dropped. Wine glasses were frozen halfway to lips. Leo looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face, which had been a mask of confident charm moments before, had collapsed into a mess of slack-jawed horror. Candace was pale as a ghost, her perfectly painted red lips a gash in her white face. They weren't just shocked that I could sing. They were horrified because they were realizing, in this very public forum, that their entire narrative was a lie. And if I could sing, what else could I do? What else could I say? When the last note faded into the cavernous silence, I did not step away. I gripped the microphone stand, my knuckles white. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of what had just happened settle into the room. Then, I leaned in. "Hello, Leo," I said. My voice was calm, measured, and carried to every corner of the ballroom. A collective gasp went through the crowd. "You seem surprised to hear my voice." The truth is, I'm a little surprised myself. It's been a long time. I looked directly at him, my gaze unwavering. "You told these people that you have been my voice. But the truth is, you only ever spoke for yourself. You told them you cared for me. But you only ever cared for what I could provide." I reached into my small evening bag and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was a summary, prepared by my lawyer. "Let me tell you what caring for me looked like. It looked like the $750,000 of your father's life insurance, which paid for your education and funded your first 3 business ventures. It looked like the 174 separate transfers from my personal accounts to yours, totaling just over $12 million over the last 15 years. It looked like the deed to my home, our family home, which you sold to finance the down payment on this life you've built." Each number was a hammer blow. The color drained completely from Leo's face. He looked trapped, exposed under the hot stage lights. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, turning from confusion to dawning comprehension. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "my silence was never about my inability to speak. It began as grief. A grief so profound it stole the air from my lungs and the words from my throat. A grief you never once asked about, never once tried to help me carry. You saw my silence not as a wound to be healed, but as an opportunity to be exploited. You built your kingdom on the foundations of my sorrow." I turned my attention to Candace, who looked like she might faint. "And you, my dear. You wanted a home gym. You were worried I would clash with your decor. You spoke of putting me in a facility, as if I were a stray dog you'd grown tired of. I hope you enjoy your new life, Candace. Because this," I gestured around the opulent room, "is all you're getting from me. The accounts are frozen. The assets are secured. The house of cards has fallen. A man in a sharp suit, Ms. Albright's associate, was now discreetly handing a legal envelope to a stunned-looking Leo. I looked back at the assembled guests. I am truly sorry to have disrupted this celebration. The word tasted like ash. But for 21 years, I have allowed a lie to define me. I have been a ghost in my own life. Today, that ends. Today, I reclaim my voice. I reclaim my life. And I reclaim my name. I am Alara Miller. And I am no longer silent. I placed the microphone carefully back in its stand, turned, and walked off the stage. The room was a chaotic mess of noise, of shocked whispers and rising voices. Leo was shouting something, a desperate, pathetic plea, but I didn't listen. I didn't look back. As I reached the grand doors of the ballroom, a hand slipped into mine. It was Maya. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was smiling, a brilliant, beautiful smile of pure joy. I knew it, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I always knew you were still in there, Mom. I heard you, even when you weren't talking. We walked out of that place together, leaving the wreckage of Leo's perfect day behind us. We didn't say much on the drive. We just held hands, a mother and daughter finding their way back to each other across a chasm of silence. It's been 6 months since that day. I live in a small, beautiful apartment by the sea now. The legal battle was short and decisive. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Leo and Candace settled quickly, their marriage reportedly already strained to the breaking point by the public humiliation and sudden financial reversal. I didn't take everything. I left him enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be complacent. I wanted him to learn the value of building something for himself, something real. I doubt he has. Maya visits me every weekend. We walk on the beach, and we talk for hours. We talk about her future, about her classes, about boys. And we talk about Daniel. I tell her stories she was too young to remember, stories of her father's kindness, his humor, his boundless love for us. In telling her, I am giving him back to her, and to myself. My voice is strong now. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the sun is setting over the water, I sing. I sing at last, not with the defiant fury of the wedding, but with a deep and abiding peace. My love, my true self, has come along. My lonely days are over. I lost my voice to grief, and for a long time, I allowed others to keep it from me. But a voice is more than just sound. It is the purest expression of the soul. And I will never, ever be silent again.